Okay, so you're staring at your dryer. Maybe it's a Whirlpool, a Maytag, a KitchenAid, and it's blinking F9 at you. I get it. It's super frustrating, the manual probably isn't helping, and you've got clothes to dry. Well, don't worry, we're gonna crack this thing together. So that's the code you're seeing, right? F9. Just popped up out of the blue. And I bet you've been searching all over the internet for what it means, only to come up totally empty. There's actually a really good reason for that.
And here it is, the big secret. F9 isn't actually a real error code. Yeah, you heard me right. It's not a standard fault code that your dryer uses. So no, you're not going crazy. And the reason you can't find an answer is that your dryer isn't really showing you an F9 in the first place.
So what in the world is going on? Well, think of this as a classic case of mistaken identity. We're about to put on our detective hats here because the answer is actually hiding in plain sight, right there on the display. You see, the number one culprit almost every single time is something called a display segment failure. Just think about an old digital alarm clock, how the numbers are made up of all those little individual lines or segments. Well, it only takes one of those little segments to burn out to completely change how a letter or a number looks. The key thing to remember is this is usually just a screen glitch, not some catastrophic mechanical failure. Let's look at our first suspect. Your dryer might actually be trying to tell you it has an E9 error, which is a high temperature fault. But watch what happens when that top little line on the E burns out. Poof! It suddenly looks just like an F. And just like that, your E9 becomes a phantom F9. Okay, here's another classic example. The real code could be F8, which points to a motor circuit fault. Now, imagine if the bottom segment of that number 8 doesn't light up. What does it look like? A 9. So the F was right all along, but the number got changed because of one tiny glitch. And one last one to really drive it home. Let's say the dryer is trying to show F1, a communication fault. If that little middle segment that makes the number 1 burns out, it can kind of merge visually with the F and create something that looks an awful lot like, you guessed it, F9. You see the pattern here, right? It's just a visual trick. All right, so now that we know what we're looking for, it's time to get our hands dirty. This is your step-by-step investigation. We're going to gather all the clues your machine is giving you to figure out what's really going on. First things first, the absolute basics. Go ahead and unplug your dryer from the wall. And don't just wait 30 seconds, leave it unplugged for a full 15 minutes. This does a hard reset of the system. Then plug it back in. Now this next part is the most important step of all. Forget about the code for a second and just use the dryer. Does it start? Does it get hot? The machine's actual behavior is your number one clue here. That's what tells you what's really wrong. So what did you find out? This is the big question. Because if your dryer is running, heating up, and finishing its cycles just fine, even though it says F9, well, that's a completely different problem than if it won't even start. Your answer right here decides what we do next. Now, if your dryer isn't working right, we've got to dig a little deeper. We need to get into the dryer's brain, which is called diagnostic mode. This special mode can actually bypass that faulty display and show you the real error codes that are stored in its memory. You can try some of these common button combos, but seriously, grab your user manual, because every model can be a little bit different. Okay, detective, you've gathered your clues, you know how the dryer is behaving, or misbehaving, and you might have even found a real error code in diagnostic mode. Now it's time to connect the dots and pinpoint the real problem. Think of this chart as your secret decoder ring. You're going to use it to match your dryer's symptoms to the actual problem. So, for instance, if your dryer is getting crazy hot or maybe not heating at all, the true culprit is probably an E9 or an F3 code, no matter what the display says. If it won't even start, you're likely looking at an F1 or F8. This is how we connect that phantom code back to reality. So, you've done the detective work, you've looked at the evidence, and now it's time to close the case. Let's talk about what your diagnosis means and, more importantly, what to do about it. You've basically got 3 ways you can go here. Option 1, if the dryer works perfectly fine, you can just ignore the glitchy display. It's really just a cosmetic issue. Or you could replace that display board, which usually costs somewhere between $80 and $150. But if your tests pointed to a real issue, like an F1 or F8, you might be looking at replacing the main control board, and that's a bit pricier. Now, it's also really important to know when to tap out. If the dryer is completely dead, If you're dealing with a gas model, which you should be very careful with, or if any of this just feels over your head, it's time to call a pro. Safety always comes first, and definitely call for service if your dryer is still under warranty. Don't risk messing that up with a DIY repair. So if you only remember one thing from all of this, let it be this. Just ignore that phantom F9 code. Your dryer's actual behavior, is it heating, is it tumbling, is it even starting? That is the real clue. The code is nothing more than a distraction. So go take a look. What is your dryer actually trying to tell you?